The 10th anniversary is a really good episode of Everybody Loves Raymond. This is the 16th episode of the 4th season. This is directed by Will Mackenzie. And as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And it starts off with Ray and Debra coming in from being out celebrating their 10th wedding anniversary. And they decide to watch their wedding video. And it starts off really well for a couple of seconds. And then a football game appears on the television. And it's established pretty quickly that Ray taped over the wedding video. And it's very clear that Debra is really upset about this because initially she shouts at Ray. Understandably, it's a valid instant response. But then she's so upset, she just goes upstairs. And to me, that is a sign that somebody is so distraught, they haven't even got it in them to fight about it. And it's a pretty devastating opening. Ray is then over at Marie and Frank's. Robert is still there recovering from when he was rammed by the bull. And Ray explains that he taped over the wedding video. And I loved Marie's response when she said, it doesn't matter if it was the Super Duper Bowl, it's still sports. And I love the fact that she wasn't on Raymond's side for a change. Even Frank looked shocked. He was shocked that Ray had done this. I mean, he was enjoying it because Ray was clearly sweating about it and Frank was getting a little bit of joy out of that. But even Frank knew it was not a good thing to do. And Marie suggests that Ray could maybe make it up to Debra by having a wedding vow renewal. And honestly, for me, I mean, I'm not a big fan of weddings in general, so I don't really understand the appeal of a wedding vow renewal. To me, it seems like it's never going to be as good as the first wedding or the first vows, but it does seem like a popular thing to do, and Ray suggests it, and Debra's all for it, and then we see Ray and Robert planning it, and Ray is really taking this seriously, and it's up to him to plan everything as his way of apologising to Debra and showing that he's really wanting to go through with this. And then the guys come over and they spend quite a few minutes talking about food. It dragged on a little bit longer than I think it needed to, but it wasn't too bad. And then Marie comes over with an invitation. Ray kind of hadn't told her that he would be organising everything, but I want to give Ray credit for that, because he very easily could have gone over and said, look, I have to organise everything, can you give me some advice? And by asking Marie for advice, she would have basically taken over everything. So credit to Ray for not doing that. And then we cut to the ceremony, and basically the rest of the episode is the ceremony. They're in the house, of course. Marie comes over with lasagna, and Ray points out that he has hors d'oeuvres, to which Marie responds, then why don't I kill myself? Which is very dramatic, but it was very funny. And Debra then comes down the stairs. The house is full of people, really lovely atmosphere, beautifully decorated. She comes downstairs with Ali and she says, can you believe Daddy pulled this off all by himself? And she doesn't really say it in a condescending way either. She says it in a way where she clearly really appreciates that, which was really lovely to see. And something was left hanging, a kind of a question, a concern, because the way she said it, it made me as a viewer think, has he really pulled this off? Something is going to go wrong. And we find out pretty quickly what that is, because they're in front of the arch and they're about to say their vows together. And, well, he didn't write the vows. Ray had been so caught up in planning everything for the vow renewal, he forgot to write his vows in order to renew them. And Debra doesn't know this, obviously, and she reads her vows, and it's really beautiful. And then Ray tries to say some stuff on the spot. And it did seem like for a split second that he was getting away with it. But very quickly he realised he just had to admit that he hadn't written them. And initially Debra was upset, because the whole point of this was to renew their vows. And he didn't write his vows. And also they'd forgotten to tape the ceremony. Robert was meant to tape it, and that didn't happen. And it just seemed like in that moment, everything was going to fall apart. And it seemed like it was going to be a catastrophe. But then Ray happened to mention that the flowers were not what he'd wanted. He'd wanted Lily of the Valley. And Debra realised that Ray had remembered her favourite flower. And honestly, I got really emotional at that point. And so did Debra. And it was really, really beautiful. And I'm getting emotional now. To me, that is more important. Remembering something significant about your partner is, well, I don't want to say it's more important than remembering to write your vows, but I think it needs to be acknowledged that Ray basically organised this completely by himself, and that's a big task. He's basically organising a small-scale wedding on his own, and that's not going to be an easy thing. So I think it's okay, maybe not okay, but understandable that he overlooked the vows because he was so overwhelmed with everything else. But remembering Debra's favourite flower is such a significant thing to Debra, and I rather liked that a lot. And so did Debra. And we end with everybody watching the game, the Super Bowl, on the VHS. That was obviously their wedding. And just before it cuts to the final moments of the game, or somebody's about to score or something, it cuts back to their wedding, which I rather enjoyed. So it's a really good episode. It's definitely very moving in places. Very funny for a lot of it. Personal highlights would be Marie and Frank, actually. I think they brought a lot of the comedy to this. Robert's face when Ray mentioned videotaping the vows, and the way the house looked as well. It was beautiful. So a really, really sweet episode. And also, I don't like this moment, but I loved how they handled Debra's reaction in the opening scene, because I just think it was so realistic. Obviously, I don't love seeing her upset, but it was very, very well done. So in all, the 10th anniversary is obviously a pretty decent episode of Everybody Loves Raymond.